Have you ever been in a conversation with someone months after you first met them, casually mentioning something, maybe a book you're reading, a problem at work, or a place you're thinking of visiting, and they pause, tilt their head slightly and say, "Didn't you mention back in March that you were nervous about that exact thing?" And suddenly the air changes. You watch their face shift from warmth to something more guarded, a flicker of discomfort crossing their features, as if they've just realized they've revealed something they shouldn't have. They laugh it off, make a self-deprecating joke about having too much space in their brain for useless details. But you caught it, that momentary flash of vulnerability, the social recalibration, the quiet awareness that they've done it again. And yet inside them, there's a different story unfolding entirely. While others forget the thread of last week's conversation, their mind has been building an intricate tapestry of every detail you've shared. Your sister's name, the coffee order you mentioned in passing, the offhand comment you made about feeling overlooked in meetings, the way your voice shifted when you talked about your childhood home. It's not effort. It's not strategy. It's simply how their brain processes connection, archiving, cross-referencing, holding space for the dimensions of who you are. But in that moment when recognition dawns on your face, not gratitude, but something closer to unease, they feel the familiar weight of being too much. You wonder if something is wrong with you when people react this way. When your memory for the details of someone's life makes them uncomfortable instead of valued. When remembering becomes a liability instead of a gift. When you start editing yourself in real time, pretending you've forgotten things you haven't, downplaying your attention because you've learned that caring too visibly can look like something else entirely, obsession, manipulation, lack of boundaries, or perhaps most cutting of all, desperation. But what if this isn't a flaw in your social calibration? What if this isn't evidence of poor boundaries or unhealthy attachment? What if the capacity to remember everything someone tells you isn't about them at all, but about the extraordinary way your mind has learned to construct safety, meaning, and connection? What if you're not remembering too much, you're simply operating with a different architecture of attention, one that our culture has not learned to recognize as valid? You're about to discover why some minds work this way, what it reveals about how you process love and danger, and why the thing that makes others uncomfortable might be one of the most profound expressions of how you've learned to survive and care in a world that taught you to pay attention. When someone realizes you remember the small things, that their mother's name is Patricia, that they hate cilantro, that they mentioned feeling anxious about a dentist appointment 3 weeks ago, their reaction often isn't the gratitude you might expect. Instead, there's a pause, a slight withdrawal, sometimes even a laugh tinged with nervousness. "Wow, you have a really good memory," they say, but what they mean is, "This feels intense. Are you keeping tabs on me?" They think you're overly invested. They think you're cataloging information for some future purpose, building a dossier, proving something. They wonder if you have nothing else occupying your mind. There's an assumption baked into our social contract. Forgetting is normal, remembering is effort, and effort this early or this detailed suggests disproportionate interest. People interpret your memory as a statement about how much space they occupy in your life, and if they don't feel they've earned that space yet, your attention registers as pressure. They think you're trying too hard. They think you want something from them. What's rarely considered is that your memory isn't a choice. It's not strategic attention allocated based on social hierarchy or romantic interest. This isn't obsession packaged as care. It's simply how your brain processes information about people. For you, details aren't extra. They're foundational. When someone tells you about their life, your mind doesn't file it under small talk to be discarded. It archives it under "this is who they are," because somewhere along the way you learned that people are made of details, that knowing someone means holding the specificity of their existence, and that forgetting feels like a small violence. But our culture interprets memory through the lens of scarcity. If you remember this much, you must not have much else to remember. To understand this, we have to step back to a fundamental truth about human memory. It's not designed to be a comprehensive recording device. For most people, the brain operates on a ruthlessly efficient triage system, determining what gets stored based on emotional salience, repetition, and survival relevance. The hippocampus, your brain's memory consolidation center, works closely with the amygdala, which tags experiences with emotional significance. If something feels important, threatening, or deeply meaningful, it gets encoded into long-term storage. If not, it's filtered out. Most casual conversation doesn't make the cut. It's evolutionary efficiency. Our ancestors didn't need to remember every detail of every interaction. They needed to remember threats, resources, alliances, and betrayals. Inside your brain, however, something different is happening. When you interact with someone, your amygdala isn't just tagging obvious threats or intense moments. It's flagging interpersonal details with a level of emotional significance that others' brains reserve for more dramatic events. Neurologically, here's what happens. When someone shares information about themselves, your brain processes it as socially salient data. The prefrontal cortex engages in what psychologists call mentalization, building mental models of other people's minds, motivations, and inner worlds. For you, this system is highly active. Details aren't peripheral, they're structural. Your mind is constantly building, updating, and maintaining intricate models of the people in your life, and memory is the foundation of those models. Research has shown that individuals with heightened interpersonal sensitivity often demonstrate enhanced memory for social information, not because they're trying harder, but because their nervous systems have been calibrated to prioritize it. For many people, remembering requires conscious effort, repetition, rehearsal, intentional encoding. But for you, the process is automatic. Someone mentions their brother lives in Seattle, and your brain doesn't treat that as disposable data. It integrates it into your understanding of who they are, adding dimension to the mental construct you're building. This isn't about superior memory in general. You might forget where you put your keys or what you ate for breakfast. But when it comes to people, your brain operates with a different threshold for what counts as important. And that threshold wasn't random. It was built. Long before most people learn that forgetting is socially acceptable, some children learn that attention is survival. If you grew up in an environment where moods were unpredictable, where a parent's tone could shift without warning, where love felt conditional on reading the room correctly, your developing brain learned something crucial. Details matter. Remembering what someone said yesterday might be the difference between safety and conflict. Noticing what makes someone happy, what triggers their anger, what they value, these aren't social niceties. They're data points in a threat detection system. Your memory didn't develop in a vacuum. It developed in response to an environment that required you to be a cartographer of other people's inner states, mapping their terrain so you could navigate it without getting hurt. When you grow up in an environment where attunement determines safety, your nervous system adapts by becoming exquisitely sensitive to social information. This is hypervigilance, but not in the way we usually discuss it. It's not just about scanning for danger. It's about building predictive models of the people around you. If you can remember that dad gets irritable when he's hungry, that mom withdraws when she's overwhelmed, that your sibling deflects with humor when hurt, you gain a sense of control. You can anticipate. You can adjust. You can manage the emotional climate by being several steps ahead. This isn't conscious strategy for a child, it's nervous system adaptation. The brain literally wires itself to prioritize interpersonal data because that data has proven to be survival relevant. And those neural pathways don't disappear when you grow up. They become your baseline. This is why you notice things others miss. Why you remember the offhand comment someone made while you were both distracted by something else. Why your mind automatically catalogs preferences, fears, stories, contradictions. Your attention isn't scattered across superficial concerns. It's laser-focused on understanding people at a granular level because that's what your brain learned to do when understanding meant safety. What looks like exceptional memory is actually exceptional attention, and exceptional attention is what happens when a child's nervous system learns that missing details has consequences. You're not remembering everything because you're obsessed. You're remembering everything because you were trained, through relational necessity, to pay attention at a depth most people never needed to develop. These patterns follow you into adulthood, shaping how you connect, how you love, how you show up in relationships. You remember because remembering is how you hold people. It's how you demonstrate care. In a world where everyone is half listening, scrolling, distracted, your attention is complete. You're fully there, absorbing not just the words but the context, the emotion beneath the words, the narrative arc of someone's life. But here's the complicated part. The same mechanism that makes you an extraordinary friend, partner, or colleague, this deep noticing, can also become a source of pain. Because when you remember someone's details with this level of fidelity and they don't reciprocate, it doesn't feel like a neutral difference. It feels like confirmation of an old fear, that your attention is too much, that carrying this deeply is a burden, that you've once again misread the contract of connection. Beneath the external behavior, the casual recall, the thoughtful gestures, the way you reference something someone told you weeks ago, there's a layer most people never admit to carrying. Shame. The quiet, persistent shame of being someone who remembers when others forget. Of caring at a volume that makes people uncomfortable. Of having to pretend you don't recall things you absolutely recall because you've learned that your memory makes you seem intense, a lot, or worse, unstable. You've started curating your own knowledge, strategically forgetting out loud, letting details go unmentioned even when they're relevant, because you've internalized the message that remembering too much is a social transgression. In a culture that treats casual forgetting as the norm and detailed memory as evidence of excessive investment, you've been placed in an impossible position. The very thing that reflects your capacity for depth, your attention to the architecture of who someone is, gets reframed as neediness, poor boundaries, or even manipulative behavior. You've been in enough situations where someone reacted with discomfort or suspicion to your memory that you've developed a painful vigilance about revealing what you know. There's a specific kind of loneliness in having to hide how much you notice, in downplaying your attentiveness so others feel less observed, less known, less obligated to reciprocate at a level they're not capable of. But shame thrives on misattribution, on the story that says your memory is evidence of deficiency rather than difference. So let's reframe this with precision. Your capacity to remember is not emotional dysfunction. It's not proof that you lack boundaries or that you're unhealthily attached. It's a sophisticated cognitive and emotional adaptation that developed in response to early relational dynamics, and it has likely served you in profound ways, making you someone who sees people clearly, who holds space for complexity, who doesn't flatten others into caricatures. This isn't broken. This is adapted. Not pathology. Pattern. Not obsession. Tension. Not too much. Different. You're not failing to maintain appropriate social distance. You're operating with a different definition of what it means to know someone, one that includes specificity, memory, and continuity. You're not cataloging information because you're unstable. You're integrating it because integration is how your mind builds trust, safety, and connection. There's nothing defective about a brain that prioritizes people. There's nothing wrong with remembering. The discomfort others feel isn't evidence of your dysfunction. It's evidence of a cultural script that equates forgetting with health and remembering with pathology. And that script is wrong. For many people, memory operates on a need-to-know basis. They remember what's immediately useful, emotionally charged, or repeatedly reinforced. Conversations wash over them and recede, leaving only the broad strokes. We talked about work. I think this isn't callousness. It's simply where their attention naturally flows. Their brains allocate resources to other things, projects, ideas, logistics, internal processing. And for them, that works. Connection doesn't require comprehensive recall. Forgetting doesn't equal not caring. But remembering everything someone said isn't about compensating for insecurity or trying to prove your worth through attentiveness. It's about where your cognitive and emotional energy naturally concentrates. While others are holding 10 surface-level connections, you're holding 3 deep architecture ones. You're not remembering more because you have nothing else occupying your mind. You're remembering because your mind treats people as the most complex, interesting, worthy of attention phenomena in your environment. Your memory is an expression of where your fascination lives. And that fascination isn't limited to romantic interest or close friendship. It extends to acquaintances, colleagues, even people you've only met once, because for you, every person is a universe, and universes deserve attention. Neither path is superior. The person who forgets the name of your sibling but remembers the plot of every movie they've seen isn't doing connection wrong. They're doing it differently. But you're not doing it wrong either. You haven't opted out of superficiality because you lack social skills. You've concentrated on depth because that's where meaning lives for you. The space isn't empty. It's occupied by richly detailed understandings of human beings. This isn't absence of boundaries. This presence directed toward people. And in a world increasingly characterized by distraction and shallow engagement, that kind of attention is rare. It's valuable. It matters. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the childhood environments that taught you to notice, the nervous system adaptations that made memory survival relevant, the adult patterns where your attention becomes an expression of care, you start to see this not as a flaw but as a coherent response to your lived experience. Your memory is a skill you didn't ask for but developed nonetheless, and like all adaptations, it comes with both gifts and costs. The gift is depth, the ability to make people feel truly seen, the capacity to hold complexity. The cost is the loneliness of being misunderstood, the shame of seeming too much, the exhaustion of pretending you notice less than you do. People who remember everything you said aren't missing social cues or struggling with obsessive tendencies. They're individuals whose brains learned early that attention equals safety, that details construct understanding, and that memory is how you honor someone's existence. They're operating with a level of interpersonal attentiveness that most people never develop, not because they're better but because they needed to. And in adulthood, that attentiveness becomes both a strength and a vulnerability, a way of connecting that can create profound intimacy or profound disconnection, depending on whether the other person has the capacity to receive it. You're not broken for remembering. You're someone whose mind holds people with unusual fidelity, and that's not pathology. That's architecture. If there's healing to be done, it's not about learning to forget. It's about learning to exist without shame in the fullness of how you pay attention. It's about finding people who don't recoil from being known. It's about understanding that not everyone will reciprocate your level of detail, and that's not a referendum on your worth. Some people connect broadly, you connect deeply. Both are valid. You get to choose how you navigate this, whether you dim your attention to make others comfortable, whether you seek out relationships where your memory is received as the gift it is, or whether you simply give yourself permission to remember without apology. The pattern shaped you into someone who sees clearly. That's not nothing. If this video put words to something you felt but never quite articulated, the discomfort of remembering too much, the shame of caring too visibly, the loneliness of pretending you've forgotten things you haven't, you're not alone. There are more of us than the culture acknowledges, people whose minds work this way, who hold others with detail and specificity, who remember because that's how we know someone matters. I'd love to hear your experience. Drop a comment and share. What's something you remembered about someone that made them uncomfortable? Or when has someone's memory of your details made you feel genuinely seen? Let's talk about the complexity of attention, the politics of memory, and what it means to care at full volume. And if you want more conversations like this, about the quiet patterns of the human mind, the things we carry without naming, the adaptations we mistake for flaws, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore these spaces together, finding language for the experiences that live just beneath the surface of ordinary life. Because understanding yourself isn't self-indulgence. It's liberation.